Good morning, party people. It is Friday morning. I've got my coffee here, and some pretty interesting stuff has happened in the sales world. Some pretty interesting stuff we've published in the follow-up since the podcast 2 weeks ago. So just wanted to jump through some of the stuff that I found super interesting, the stuff I think you'll find pretty interesting. So enough with the intro. Let's just get into it. So the first topic that I have here is actually a blog post that we published last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. And it's basically this person that built a whole website. The website is called spammerlist.wordpress.com. And the website is basically a showcase of anyone that has ever sent them a cold email. So if you've cold emailed this person trying to sell your services or product to them, like, hey, just a normal cold email, they will take your email as well as the signature at the bottom of your email and actually post it on this website. If you go on this website, it's pretty funny. I'll read what it actually says at the top. So the actual tab of the website says, "Hi, I'm a spammer." It has one of those, "Hello, my name is," stickers. And on that sticker, it says, "Hello, my name is a spammer. If you're listed here, you send unsolicited spam. Since you like to spam, I assume you want to receive it as well." It's so funny. It's like they're saying like, "Ooh, burn, like got him." Like, yeah, me posting your email on this WordPress site that like nobody's going to view other than like laughing at it. You're now going to get a bunch of spam emails. I mean, little do I know, maybe they actually like do get put in a database and start getting a bunch of spam emails. Who knows? But they also define what spam is. So they say, what is spam, or UCE, also known as unsolicited commercial email? They said spam or UCE is promotional email sent to a mailbox recipient that has not opted in or given permission to the sender. So essentially any cold email you've ever received, right? So like, unless you're subscribed to a newsletter or mailing list, it's like any other cold email or any email you've received. So I thought this was hilarious. I mean, bravo to this person that like took the time to actually create a WordPress website and probably weekly or daily goes in and makes edits to the site and actually adds in these new email addresses that email them. So honestly, like if you're on this list, like good for you. It means you're doing your job, you're a sales rep, and you're making cold emails. You're trying to sell. I just thought that was hilarious. You can go check that out again. It's spammerlist.wordpress.com. It's pretty funny. I want to know who the person is behind this because I've seen screenshots of what happens when they actually send an email to this person. So I actually came across this website because there was an Instagram post of someone that actually sent this person an email. It said, "Hannah, I don't do business with spammers. You obtained my email address illegitimately and violated the terms of service of multiple companies when you sent me the email below. Congrats!" Exclamation point. I mean, what does she mean obtained it illegally? You can obtain an email address through pretty much any data provider. Anyway, I don't do business with spammers. Stop emailing me. I will never in red, by the way, do business with your company. Congratulations on making my wall of shame at spammerlist.wordpress.com. You can meet other spammers there as well as have your contact info picked up by search engines. So I want to know who the person behind this is. They obviously have the email scratched out, but like, I just have a feeling this is like a low-level, mid-level manager that, needs a little bit more to get upset about and just has fun with this. So that was a funny story that I found. I thought it was awesome this week. The next one that we actually have here is Tony Robbins. So we came across a video from 30 years ago from Tony Robbins giving one of his, talks in person. And in the video, he's basically describing exactly how he sells. And the interesting part of it is during the video, he's sort of using the techniques that he's teaching to sell the audience on his technique. But he says the two real keys to selling or persuasion, he basically says that persuading is selling because it is. The two keys to it, or two things that make it up, is identifying the buying state and then anchoring your product back to that buying state. So there's a whole walkthrough on exactly what the buying state is, how to get someone into the buying state. But essentially the buying state is when someone has already agreed that they have an issue. They're ready to buy something. They're in the state of like saying yes, yes, yes. You can draw it back to some other times they've made purchases as well. So once they're in that buying state, he makes it sound like once they're in that buying state, you could throw anything in front of them and they're going to make the purchase. But you need to get them in that buying state, and then you anchor your product into that buying state and why they need to buy it, and then you eventually close them. So that was an interesting video as well as topic we wrote about. You can read the entire thing, exactly how he breaks down the whole step process. I think it's 5 or 6 steps to actually take them through from just like a cold approach into closing the deal. So check that out. Obviously, jointhefollowup.com, and it's our last post on Tony Robbins. Next thing I want to get into here is some of the interesting remote sales jobs we've seen come up. So the first one we have here is an account executive at AngelList. And I think this is super interesting because when I look at a job, obviously you want to work for an awesome company, but I think you also need to think about the person that you're selling to, right? So like personally me, I don't want to go sell to owners of a auto body shop or maybe restaurant owners, right? It's just not something that I want to do. It's not something I find super interesting, although some people might. And with this, as an account executive at AngelList, you actually get to sell to people that are, raising funds, venture capitalists. AngelList basically creates the software to help people raise funds and manage their funds, like investment funds. So if you were going to go raise a $50 million fund to deploy across a bunch of businesses, you'd probably use AngelList. And as an account executive, you get to go out and find those people and sell to them. So that's why I think that's super interesting. And I think that it's something you need to really think about when you're taking a sales job is the actual person that you're going to be selling to. And if you find it interesting and it sort of scratches like a personal itch, I think that's awesome. When I was at Amazon, and why I went to Amazon is because I had a personal itch about learning more about Amazon sellers. And in that role, I got to work with and sell to some of the biggest Amazon sellers in the US. And that sort of just like kept my curiosity peaked all the time. So I think that's something you should look for in a remote job, and why I find this AngelList account executive remote sales role pretty interesting. The next two that I actually have here are account executive positions at Beehive as well as SparkLoop. So Beehive and SparkLoop are both software companies in the newsletter space. Both of them have been growing super quickly. I think Beehive is probably, since Beehive creates the entire newsletter platform, it's probably one that I would look at over SparkLoop. Although SparkLoop and Beehive, like they're both very much intertwined in the newsletter industry. So if you're interested in newsletters like me, I think both of these are super cool. They will both be 6-figure jobs, and they're both remote at growing companies. And I know at least Beehive includes equity. I'm not sure about SparkLoop, but those are both really cool remote sales jobs where if I was on the market right now, those are definitely ones that I would be applying to. Okay, and not last topics, but the last part that I want to go through is some of the sales news topics of the week. So the first thing kicking it off here, we have the founder of Saster says that sales reps who can't answer how can your app actually solve my problems through cold email, those are going to be the ones replaced by AI super quick. And I understand what he's saying 100%. So if you get a cold email, if you've ever gotten a cold email or sent a cold email, you probably understand of like, it can be hard, but it's so necessary to say exactly what your product is going to do for that exact person to ever get a response, right? Like you can't expect that person to be like, oh, let me think about what this person's tool can do and how it would make my life easier, right? Like you need to speak directly to them. Say, hey, I know you're spending 50 hours a week doing your manual inputs on this spreadsheet. My tool is going to make it so that you don't have to do that anymore, and it's going to save you this much time. Obviously, it's hard to do that without fully knowing that person, but like your cold emails to really be effective need to speak to that exact person and what they want and what matters to them. So if you can't do that, if you can't really say like, hey, my application or my software or my product does exactly what you need it to solve your problem, then yeah, like AI can obviously come in and act as an SDR. So I think he's more referring to like sales development reps or business development reps that are more of like sending cold emails to a lot of people. But yeah, I think this is the case where a lot of emails we get over the next 5 years are probably going to come from AI bots, and they're probably going to know how to really speak to people's problems and like actually talk about the products in a way that's personalized to that person and the problems that they have. So the next thing we have here is a sales rep on Reddit explains exactly what it takes to make $132,000 in sales commissions in Q1 before taxes. Now, this is a bit of a joke. It's sarcastic. And the reason that he's saying this is basically like, look, a lot of people come on here and say, hey, I just made $100,000 this quarter. It was so easy. You can do it too. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. But the actual truth behind it is that, they spent 2 years building a book of business. They finally got a big order in January 2024. That deal closed, the biggest deal ever, right? And now they can say, hey, look, I made 6 figures in Q1. And maybe that's their only deal. And they're not going to have another one in Q2 or Q3, right? And like that was the biggest one that they can go off of and that they're basically going to talk about for the next year. That can happen a lot in sales. You can have a big quarter or a big deal come in that can make the day for you. And it's easy to say things like, yeah, it's because, all the work I've been doing recently. But really, when it comes down to it, sales, there is a lot of luck. And there's also like a lot of, it's like an iceberg, right? Like you see at the top where the commission comes in, but like all of the work that it takes for the last 2 years in your company building, brand with that company, basically staying in contact with them, doing all this stuff that basically then resulted in that commission check 2 years later or a year later. Just be careful what you read online when someone says, oh, I made 6 figures in a month. But it's like, yeah, but did it actually take you like 2 years to get to that month to make that? That's a lot of the time what's happening. And also, people just lie online. So anytime you see I made 6 figures in a month, just be skeptical. Understand what they're selling. And if it's a course, understand how they're making it. The next one we have here is a pretty big topic, and it's not B2B sales, but it's interesting because it affects all realtors, which are probably one of the biggest classes of salespeople in America, which is basically anyone that sells a home as a real estate broker, not a broker, but as a real estate realtor. There's a major lawsuit over basically the buyer's commissions. So before, a house would be listed by the seller's agent, and then you also a lot of the time would have a buyer's agent. So the seller's agent is the one that works with the seller, gets it listed, gets it put on the MLS, shows it, all of that stuff. They get their commission. And then you also have a buyer's agent who basically just takes them to the open house, negotiates with the other agent, and helps get the deal done between the two. Now, before, the buyer's agent was essentially making the same as the seller's agent. Although it wasn't as much work, a lot of the times there was 6% commissions paid in total. 3% would go to the buyers and 3% would go to the sellers. Now, after this lawsuit, basically the National Association of Realtors is going to pay $418 million to settle this lawsuit. And they're also getting rid of that 6% commission. So no longer can the buyer's agent request and basically guarantee that they're going to get 3%. So what this really means is that it's going to be harder to make a living as a buyer's agent. So a lot of these agents are going to have to fight for those sellers listings. That's where they're going to make the real money. This is good somewhat for people trying to buy homes because those commissions may make the prices go down, although it's not likely. Most of the time, like, sellers aren't really thinking about the commissions in their sales price. So like if you said, hey, my house is worth $500,000, but now I need to pay 2% less in commission fees, you're not going to go, oh, well, my house is now worth 2% less, right? Like the cost of the realtor is just sort of a cost of doing business. It doesn't actually necessarily play into how much your house is worth. So probably won't see anything on prices. However, buyer's agents are probably not going to be making as much anymore. And there's going to be a lot of fight over, actually getting the listings. The other thing is that if you're like a more savvy real estate person and you don't need like a buyer's agent to walk you through, title insurance and all the things that come along with real estate, you're probably going to skip directly over a buyer's agent and go directly to the seller's agent. Like if you can go to them and say, hey, look, I won't use a buyer's agent they won't take any percentage. Now you're going to save that 2%. Now let's make a deal here and let's take, 2% off the listing price or whatnot. Like if you can cut out the buyer's agent, you're probably going to figure out a way to do that if you're more of like a savvy real estate person. But if you're like a first time home buyer, or you don't know that much about real estate, you're probably still going to use a buyer's agent. And in that case, that's negotiable now. It's not like they're definitely going to get 3%. They could say, hey, maybe the buyer's agent only gets 1% or something this year or for this sale. Okay. Next one we have here is the CEO of Insight Global, which is like a massive recruiting firm, says that you should never ask in an interview, what's the work-life balance for this role? Basically, he says, if you ask that in an interview, it's almost an automatic no for a lot of people. And people probably are going to get triggered about this. And I'm sure like this article is written to trigger people a little bit. But I understand what he's saying here. So if you walk into an interview and you're immediately like, hey, by the way, like how much PTO can I take? How much do I not have to work? I want to make sure that like I don't have to work that much. Like it's in the same realm of like, hey, I just want to make sure that you're not expecting me to work after 5 o'clock, right? You'd much rather hire someone that's like, hey, like I'm super motivated. I want to work all the time. I see myself here for a long time, rather than someone that's like, hey, look, I log in at 9 a.m. and I'm out at 5 p.m. and don't expect anything else from me. Obviously, there's a lot of people like that and a lot of people that are entitled in corporate America, but that's not someone you necessarily want to hire. Like when you're hiring for a role, you'd much rather have someone that's super motivated and isn't so much worried about like, hey, when can I log out? And you better not email me for the rest of the night. So that's one I found interesting. I understand what he's saying, but the way that the article was written, I'm sure triggered a lot of people. Okay, and the last one that I have here is a little bit of a feel-good story. So basically, a sales rep had been working with a prospect for a while. They hadn't come to an agreement that they were 100% going to buy yet, but he needed that deal. It was like end of quarter, end of month. And so he just sent a Hail Mary DocuSign along with all the attachments to close the deal. And 2 minutes later, DocuSign signed and he gets it back and the deal is closed. So he wasn't necessarily expecting it, but I just love that story because we've all been sort of in a role like that or in a situation like that. If you've been in sales, right? Like it's the end of a quarter or the end of a month and you need to hit your quota. Let's say you're, 1 or 2 meetings away or you're 1 or 2 deals away. And you just start getting a little desperate. There might be that one person from 2 months ago that you haven't spoken to in a while, and you're like, they were going to come in. I haven't talked to them in a while. They didn't say for sure that they were interested, but it seemed like they were interested. Let me just throw this last Hail Mary email and say, hey, are you ready to move forward? Or, hey, can we talk this week? We've all been there. It usually doesn't work, but every once in a while it will. So props to this rep that got that Hail Mary DocuSign closed, and I'm pretty sure it met his quota in the last part of the month or the week. So that is it for the pod. I hope you enjoyed these topics. If you have any suggestions or ways that you think I could do this better, please leave them in the comments. Also, obviously, if you're not subscribed to the follow-up, go to jointhefollowup.com, subscribe to the newsletter. That's where we send out all this stuff every Tuesday and Thursday. And all the topics that I talked about today can be found in the newsletter. And you can look at the past newsletters that were sent out at jointhefollowup.com. But that is it, and peace.